And we had an atmospheric river that de- deluged deluged the San Francisco Bay Area. 3 feet of snow in the Sierra and the Northern California dams are getting a bit of a head start on winter. Although we needed the rain, we also had some areas that were devastated by the recent fires that are experiencing hardships with flooding and being watched for possible mudslides. There were areas up north with over 12 inches of rain in a 24-hour period. I understand the East Coast and possible uh, nor'easters are of concern as well. We send out prayers to those across the nation experiencing some difficult weather issues. Briefly, I'd like to give a compliment to a politician named is Keith Carson, supervisor of Alameda County, Keith Carson. They recently had a vote on the Howard Terminal, and let me be clear, Keith Carson was the only board of supervisor who stood up for the economic stability of those port workers and understanding that if that Howard Terminal is turned into the Fisher Disneyland, it's going to clog up that bay with ships not being loaded, and the adverse effect on the commerce, both import and exporting, is going to be devastating. So Keith Carson, if I had a hat on, my hat off to you, brother. Thank you for looking out for the people, your constituents. Also, the NBA, and this has something to do with the African American Sports Entertainment Group. The WNBA, Alana Beard, and the AASEG, which is the African American Entertainment Group, have news of the day. They are moving forward. I'm sure you like to hear that, Dr. Ashley.
Absolutely.
A special thanks to our sponsor, Magnolia Engineering and Construction, for the continued support. And we congratulate Tammy Willis. And I want to share this news with you. She has been selected one of two BART Audit Committee member. Congratulations, Tammy. She's the only African American woman on the BART Audit Committee. Once again, Tammy is doing some great things. Magnolia Engineering Construction continue to lead the way in Black women in areas that they typically and normally and had in the past been denied opportunity in. Congratulations, Tammy Willis. I'm sure with your auditing skills, you're going to clean BART up and get them running tip-top shape. Thank you, Tammy Willis, and congratulations. As of today, she was selected to the board of BART for an appointment to BART Audit Committee. You can visit her at Magnolia Engineering and Construction.com. That's Magnolia Engineering and Construction.com. Today's show highlight, local community activism. Oh, we're going to light it up today. Now, let me tell you, Dr. Ashley, I'm the only male on the show today. So if I start having anxiety and panic attacks, I'm going to, grab my new squeezy thing. I left my stick in the car. I'm going to grab my new squeezy thing and learn how to manage my stress.
There you go.
But, hey, today's show highlights local community activists and the importance of value of voting. And let me make clear that all of you understand the importance and value of voting can determine your community, your neighborhood, your city, your county, your state, and your federal government. Now, many of you say that I can't make a difference. Many of you say that my vote doesn't make a difference.
Mhm.
Our guest today is going to demonstrate how voting got her in office and made a difference. Thank you. We lose many good grassroots candidates that run in our elections, all because those of you that could get out and vote don't vote. This is uh, why is this opportunity to bring change not of importance to everyone? Every eligible voter. It is not the fault of those that do vote as they are making the effort. Now, next voting season, I'm going to ask each and every one of you to call a friend, to call a family member. I challenge you to call 5 people and say, hey, did you vote today? Do you need a ride to go vote? And I encourage you to vote, because if we don't start exercising our right to vote, we're going to have politicians in there that are not going to be in the best interest of their constituent. So once again, use your vote and study the politicians and the what they stand on, and vote. If It is not the fault of those that do vote as they are making an effort. Due to the pandemic, voting was made convenient and safe to address COVID-19 compliance in states such as here in California by sending out mail in ballots to keep all communities safer, especially those most vulnerable, including communities of color. You had to be a registered voter on our voter roll to get a ballot mailed to your registered voter address. Signature matching was required, and if your signature was not matched from your registration card, you were given the opportunity to correct it and or confirm your submitted ballot. You could also track your ballot electronically to know the status of receipt and if counted. Our election in California was secure, and as one of the most populated states in the country, that is a big accomplishment. Let's give California a big round of applause. Cali, I'm going back to Cali. Oh, I'm in Cali. All right. Our guests today include our weekly check-in with Dr. Ashley Coleman, Department Chair, Assistant Professor of Psychology at the University of the West. Welcome, Dr. Ashley.
Thank you, Doug. Always a pleasure to be here with you.
Well, let me say this as a sidebar, Dr. Ashley, and I encourage all of our audience out there, just like a bad tooth, just like a broken leg, you would go see a dentist for a bad tooth, you would go see a doctor, an orthopedic doctor, to repair your leg. When you have mind problems, go see a doctor in psychology. Dr. Ashley, once again, thank you for being on the show, and thank you for adding that value, that mental value to this show, and so that our audience can see that our doctors can look like us too.
Thank you.
Next, we have Janani Ramachandran, Esquire. She continues to be our social justice warrior, fighting for Oakland one day at a time. Congratulations on all the new exciting changes since you were last on the show. Catch up with Janani at any time via her website, Janani4CA. That is Janani4CA.com. And Instagram at Janani4CA. Our next special guest, and I say special because I've been knowing this sister for over 10 years. We worked together on the Oakland branch of the NAACP. We've worked on a couple of political campaigns, maybe opposite of each other. This sister has a commitment to improving her community. This sister is willing to take over a house and fight SWAT for homes, for mothers with children. I proudly want to introduce, and glad that she's coming on the show, Council Member, District 3, Carol Fikes. Carol Fikes is the council member elect for Oakland District 3 and one of the following members of Moms for Housing. Visit carolfikes.org or on Instagram at Carol Fikes. Or excuse me, Carol Ford Council. Now, let's move forward. Now for our national political highlight. Another sister. Dr. Ashley, what's going on with the sisters? Every time we got city councilmen, we got running for Senate, running Barbara Lee, who is a congresswoman who's doing a great job, and also a vice president of the United States. Black women, you are leading the way in this country. And I believe it's going to be Black women that's going to straighten this country out because it's a little crooked right now. Val Demings is running for the 2022 Florida seat. If you would like to stay updated on Team Demings, text the word join to 77076. She is the former police chief seeking to unseat Republican Little Marco Rubio in Florida as he continues to fail Floridians morning, noon, and night. Little Marco, pack your little bags, put your little tennis shoes on, those size 3, and scurry on up out of there so Val Demings can clean up the mess that you created down there in Florida. Be sure to register to vote. Let's flip this seat and let Val Demings, former police chief, escort him right back home. Val Demings for the 2022 Senate, her tagline, never tire. Never tire. Election date, November 8th, 2022. Learn more on Instagram at Val Demings. And now, the news of the day. Dr. Ashley, please take it away. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doug. So on this day, October 28th, 1958, 2 Black boys, ages 7 and 9, were arrested and jailed for over 3 months after a white girl kissed them on their cheeks. Now, Doug, I'll ask you to take a deep breath with me and our parents and listeners and grandparents and aunts and uncles, because I am going to share a little bit about how this may relate today in general with consent about touch and other things. Unfortunately, a mob of white men in Monroe, North Carolina, stormed the home of a 9-year-old Black boy named James Hanover Thompson, threatening to lynch him after a white girl told her parents that she kissed him on the cheek when they were playing together earlier that day. And James and another Black boy named David Fuzzy Simpson, who was 7 years old at the time, who the girl also kissed on the cheek, were arrested by police, held in jail without contact with their families for days, denied an attorney, and sentenced to indefinite terms, ultimately serving over 3 months. Earlier in the day, a group of children, again, they were playing a kissing game, and On October 31st, so on Halloween, a group of police officers broke into the boys' cell wearing white sheets to intimidate them, while white residents of Monroe burned a cross on the Thompsons' front lawn and fired shots into their home throughout the boys' detention. Both Evelyn Thompson and Jenny Simpson, the mother of the two young men, were fired from their jobs. After a brief hearing on November 4th, in which they were both denied the right to an attorney, James and David were charged with molestation and sentenced to indefinite terms at the state reformatory in Hoffman, North Carolina. Again, at the time, Robert Williams, the president of the Monroe chapter of the NAACP, began a campaign urging officials to send the young men back to their families. He also petitioned the then president, it was President Eisenhower at the time, who ultimately did not intervene. Finally, on February 13th, 1959, over 3 months after James and David were incarcerated, North Carolina's governor pardoned the young men and released them to return home. Neither the governor nor the court admitted to any wrongdoing, and no officials ever apologized to the boys or their families. I'd like to again acknowledge the work of the Equal Justice Initiative. This is the first time I'm hearing of this story, and I know it was difficult for me to read. Doug, I see your facial expression because I only imagine the emotions that are going through your mind, that you're experiencing your body and the thoughts. But I want to invite our listeners to actually go to the page, because you can see a picture of these now very senior men who are still here to tell their story. Again, that's calendar.eji.org. Thank you again to Equal Justice Initiative for sharing these stories of resilience that are also painful to bear witness to. And before I go on to kind of elaborate and connect some things that I want our listeners to hear about youth, touch, and consent, Doug, just want to check in with you about what's going on, your reaction to what I just shared.
Dr. Ashley, two things. First, as a Black man, I'm hurt, crushed, disheartened. And every week we outline a story. Some of courageous white abolitionists back in the day, but to hear two boys, kids, and we know the effect on young Black men to this day being profiled. 2 weeks ago, we had the brother DWB driving while Black, and they took his money. This is horrific. And for it not to have checks and balances in 2021, and I don't know if they're putting young men in jail now, but just thinking about living back in that era, what is the psychological effect on those boys? And not just those boys, but people who said, you know what happened to little Bobby and little Mikey? If a white girl come at you, you better run, Forrest, run. That is horrific. That is damaging for life. And second, I want to share with our audience real briefly. We've been doing this show for going on 20 episodes now. I think we're at 20 plus episodes. And audience, let me be perfectly clear. And you notice when I say perfectly clear, I'm going to hit you with something. I get anxiety attacks. I get nervous. I wonder if my shirt is done, or I wonder if my haircut. I get anxiety attacks. But because I am visiting a professional doctor who helps me to get over that. If it wasn't for that, I couldn't be here. I share that with you because I have to humble myself to let our audience know when you have a hurt, a pain, and not just physical, mentally, go see a doctor. I was one of those men who said, man, you got to be crazy. I don't see no shrink, no head. Dr. Ashley, when I tell you on this show, each and every time, I mean it from the bottom of my heart. Just listening to you, knowing that I'm with a doctor. And you remember when we had the disease infectious doctor, the medicine doctor. I was ready to pass out, catch COVID-19, and have a nervous breakdown because I had the best doctors in the United States. But brothers and sisters, I humbly ask you, reach out so that you can be a better person. You'll be a better person not only to yourself, but to your family, to your friends. You'll be a better worker at your job. But don't take this lightly. It is a serious thing. And like I said before, I'd be like, I don't have anxiety. No, I get them. And once again, Dr. Ashley, thank you for your words of wisdom. And we're going to go off into you right now so I can tone it down a little bit more. Our next weekly check-in with I almost want to say with our very own, because I've owned you, Dr. with our very own Dr. Ashley Coleman, Doctor of Psychology. Dr. Ashley, please take it away today. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you. Welcome again to our listeners. Just to kind of transition from that last segment, and Doug, I really appreciate you sharing the impact on you personally as a Black man. Just want to inform our listeners that have minors around. While there are different and newer laws regarding consent, something that is important to know that impacts our Generation Z, so that's anyone born between 1997 and 2012, and even our youth that are younger, is sexting. And that means that if your minor were to send or receive an illicit text message from another minor with any type of nudity, they could be charged for child pornography. I want to say this again because I'm a law and ethics professor with regard to the laws for marriage and family therapy, and I've done in-services for parents. But I want to say this, and the reason why I'm linking this is because, again, these young men were disciplined for the action of another minor who initiated the contact. So again, if your child receives an image, they need to inform you immediately. And then that needs to be documented and deleted. But having any type of sexting image on one's phone or sending it, the recipient as well as the sender can receive a child pornography charge. So I'll leave that there. Just want to plant that seed again, because innocent actions or actions where we don't know the laws, we can still be held accountable. Today, Doug, I'm so excited to hear what Ms. Fife is going to share with us about community advocacy. And I want to invite our listeners to consider that even though we're in the holiday season and it may not seem like we're back to our normal, and we're not, we're still surviving a pandemic, still making some very difficult decisions regarding holidays, who's going to be granted access. Our resident physicians who come and visit us, the sister doctors, were telling us ways to kind of socially distance and have dinner. But one of the things that can get our minds focused is in our generosity. How can we become involved in our communities? Holidays for me aren't just about joining and seeing faces and whatnot, but it's also about taking inventory. And based on what you were sharing earlier about some of the most important elections, I'm going to be honest, my generation of older millennials and younger sometimes don't feel as though they can make a difference through their votes. And I think that's a discussion for us to continue. I think there's definitely, we have a voice and we can definitely make change. But another way to make change is to look around your community and see, what does your community need? and to ask yourself, what are the gifts that you have? What are the issues that you're passionate about, where you can actually honor and donate your time or donate your gift? So we know, for instance, I'm in Los Angeles, even though I'm, Oakland born and raised. And it's not uncommon for people to want to donate clothing or participate in food drives during the holidays. But Doug and our listeners, I'm going to be very honest. In Los Angeles, that can also become a photo op for some celebrities. So it can be difficult to actually find places to volunteer for the unhoused or those needing resources. Because again, it could become high profile. But other things to think about are what else are you passionate about? Where your gifts lie. So for instance, for me, literacy is really important. So for 3 years, I donated my gift of being an educator to a nonprofit organization working with young Black boys. Specifically, I wanted to work with young Black boys. And it was very, very, it was an enriching opportunity. We went on field trips. This is pre-COVID, of course, but just thinking, I'm actually challenging myself this year. So I don't know if it's going into the community. I like to bring psychological knowledge wherever I can, because I know that there can be barriers to access to resources to getting to a therapist. So that may mean me looking for a place where I can do a talk or share about the warning signs of depression in a way, or go to a community. I'm thinking about local churches or whatnot. But I want to, encourage all of our listeners, especially those that are younger, that may say, I don't know how I can get involved. I have many peers that are back in Oakland, going back to work at our high schools. Shout out to Skyline High School, working there in the Oakland Public School District. They're reading to children, volunteering time for tutoring. So really looking at after school programs and just ways, again, that we can reach back and pull forward. And so I know that Ms. Fife is going to elaborate on her experience in District 3, but I think it's a wonderful time for us to also get outside of ourselves and whatever we've been worried about and frustrated about and dealing with, and remember that we still have a purpose, and that can be something that we can channel our attention to. What is my purpose? And despite what I'm going through, how can I be a blessing to someone else?
Dr. Asher, let me be clear. My purpose would not be as strong if you weren't purposely here every Thursday. And as I just stated before you went into our weekly check-in, I have anxiety attacks. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I don't even want to wake up and come out the house. Mm-hmm. I've been dealing with a situation for the last year. It's been very helpful, but I beg you, if you want to be an asset to your community, to your family, to yourself, if you feel overwhelmed, you have anxiety attacks, or anything related to a psychological issue, we won't say problems, we'll just say issue, get help. Because if I didn't listen to the logical, intelligent side of me, I would not even be here on this show. Because it would be overwhelming. It would be something would happen. So, audience, please go see a therapist if you think you need to see a therapist. And just in the last 3 weeks, I've been to 2 funerals. Young kids having suicide. And I'm not saying having suicide, committing suicide. Audience, check on your children. Talk to them. Ask them, do they need to talk to someone? And a lot of times kids don't want to talk to the parents. So, Dr. Ashley, if you could say something briefly on to go, I have a child. Well, she's not a child, but I have a daughter. And I would be devastated if she committed suicide and I didn't take the time. So can you take a few minutes and tell our audience how important it is to, when a kid says it's okay and they think, talk to our audience for a few minutes and tell them, go get that kid some help. Thank you.
Sure. And I want to express my condolences. We know that suicide attempts are up for adults and children. I'm going to go a different angle. It can be very shaming to experience struggles or to feel hopeless. And in families, sometimes when children want to confide in someone, they're afraid of what they confide to someone becoming family gossip. And this isn't me being blaming, but it's also we need to frame, kind of create a culture of confidence where your child can come to you and also will not hear you telling your sister and Lord have mercy and what's going on. No. Second of all, children do not have, this is our frontal lobe in our brain and the executive functioning, this part. So we call this the executor. And this part of our brain is responsible for planning for the future, understanding that there's a future. Well, our frontal cortex and our frontal lobe is not fully developed until the age of 24, 25. This is why most car dealerships, when you want to rent a car, they say you have to be 25 because they're expecting they're after 25 impulsivity and decision making is supposed to impulsivity go down, sound decision making increase. But with how this impacts our children is when they're suffering, they don't see a future. They don't see that what they're going through is temporary. And what they can rely on and need are the adults in their lives to be transparent and to say, at one point in time, this is how I struggled and this is how I got through it. And the reason why I'm saying that is because it can feel very intimidating when you're going through a struggle and you're looking at the adults around you and they've gotten out of something, but they're ashamed of their testimony. Then it makes you feel like I can't relate to anything or I'm disappointing my parent. They'll kill me if they find out about this. They won't love me. So it's just really important to be accessible by being more transparent about failures of adults and recovery. And also, just if I can say this, Doug, your children are more than their performance and they're more than their grades. Please delight in your children beyond what they do, delight in who they are. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Dr. Ashley. Once again, audience, I've been to 2 funerals in the last, say, 3, just say 4 weeks of young people committing suicide. It is critical that you get your kids the help. And they're your kids, whether they're 5 or 25, they're your kids. Dr. Ashley, can you break for a sponsorship and let's get our sister grassroots fighter of social justice on the line here?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Donnie Glover of BlackUSA.news. Want to invite our listeners to tune in to Chap and Friends on Mondays, Party Marty Let's Talk on Tuesdays. And again, congratulations to Tammy Willis of Magnolia Engineering and Construction. Want to acknowledge the company whose vision is to further the presence of Black women in the construction and engineering industry through key partnerships and building contracts in the municipal, government, and transportation sectors. And to our listeners, if you would like to join our BBRT advertising family, please contact us using our email address, bbrt2021@hotmail.com. Thank you, and back to you, Doug.
Well, is Janani back in the backstage? Oh, I missed this sister, our grassroots social fighter. I would like to welcome back with open arms. And if you, Janani, if you notice, I got my Men in Black suit on, so you got security here, right here, girl. I got you. All right, I got my Men in Black suit.
I see.
Janani, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Honestly, I love listening to both of you on the show before I come on. I'm always inspired by both of you, but today, Dr. Ashley, you really touched what you were saying. Really touched me, and I'm sure touched a lot of people. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Janani.
But John, let me give you the formal introduction. I was so happy to see, the show hasn't been the show. I mean, we're going to move forward, but girl, your input is invaluable. And I'll say that again, your input is invaluable. So let's cut right into it. Janani Ramachandra Esquire, social justice attorney and friend of the show, and taking the initiative to help our community of color move forward in a positive direction. Dr. Ashley, I know you missed it just as much as I did. Can you ask this young lady whatever you want to ask her? Because I got a question or two, too. It's good to see you, Janani.
Likewise.
Absolutely. Welcome back, Janani. We definitely did miss you. Again, it's been a while. We know that you've been busy. Is there anything that you would like to catch our audience up on? Give us the latest. What have you been doing?
Sure. So I am now working as a workers' rights attorney at a legal nonprofit in Oakland, Centro Legal de la Raza.
Okay.
And this is an organization founded in 1969 and has been serving Oakland residents and beyond since. And in the workers' rights world, we do a lot of wage theft cases. So employers who just fail to pay their employees for the work that they're doing, making sure they pay. And I think that is important, especially because a lot of employers, unfortunately, assume that their workers don't know their rights to pursue these claims. And that's what we're here for. And there are also other issues involving workplace discrimination and harassment and retaliation. And I really enjoy doing this work and getting engaged one-on-one with workers.
That's awesome. Congratulations. Just want to echo that for your new position. And I'm glad that you're advocating for wages, given I still remember from your campaign your plan of the $22 minimum wage. So I'm never going to forget that. So thank you.
And I'm never going to stop fighting for it. There are a lot of, sure, I wanted to fight for it at the state assembly level, but there are so many different ways that we can advocate for raising the minimum wage because it has to happen. We talk about this labor shortage right now, but which is true. There is a gap in labor. There are so many. You go all over town and there are places that say, wanted. We want. They're hiring. But the real issue is our wages. Wages are too low. People are making complicated decisions between childcare and working, making complicated decisions between school and balancing multiple jobs. Even if you think about the gig economy, it's supposed to be this whole, let's be flexible and suit your needs for when you want to work. But if you're still ending up working 80 hours a week just to make ends meet off of barely minimum wage work with all of this traction that these companies make, it's not flexible for anyone.
Janani, I was looking down because I was making sure I wrote that down. I know a lot of people who would need your services with some of these employers out there. So I'll be following up with you on that one. How important is individual community activism, and how can someone perhaps at least tread into the community activism in their school, perhaps as a youth activist, or in the community as an adult? Thank you.
I think people can be activists at any age, absolutely any age. But what inspires me right now is the youth. Throughout the course of, well before I launched my state assembly race, I had been interacting with young people, particularly high school students across the Bay Area, and it brings me joy. It is inspiring to hear young people today talk about complicated issues and be an activist, both, yes, in terms of the sexy activist work of marching in the streets and carrying the posters and holding the megaphone, which is important. It is a very important part of the movement, but also young people doing the side of activism that is not glamorous, calling into council meetings or school board meetings, writing letters, making phone calls, knocking on doors, the real work behind so many of these social movements. And kids these days are not afraid to talk about the complicated issues. A couple of years ago, actually, I was a guest speaker at a high school on a conference led by students talking about domestic violence and mental health. And the way these students were talking about these issues was wonderful and music to my ears. And I wish I had half of the vocabulary even that they had when they were even talking about these issues. But we see here in Oakland too, students were a major part of the fight to get cops out of schools. And enough school board members, supported. There were a lot of other folks, but it was students. Students marched for tenants' rights. Students have been marching for George Floyd protests and beyond. Students also, young people, have stepped up in this past year to rally in Oakland to promote API and Black solidarity rather than these divides that our media and often government keeps perpetuating. So I think it's really heartening for me to see students actually step up to the plate and being an activist. And I think there's so many ways that people can do it. There's some young people, people of all ages, that are shy and don't want to be at the front of the protest, don't want to hold a microphone. And there are so many roles for you in every single movement. And folks are finding, especially young people, it just warms my heart to see and hear people making a difference already at this young age.
Janani, you look like you can be in high school too, girl. So it's easy probably for you to relate. I walk in there and they'll be going like, Santa Claus, where's my Christmas? Janani, I see you also follow our next guest, Carol Pipes, on Instagram as well. You share an important view on getting those that are without housing here in the Bay Area. Do you have any updates or resources to share with the housing front for community members in need? Thank you.
It's no surprise that we are in such a housing crisis in so many different ways, but one thing I do want to draw attention to is our eviction moratorium. So the assembly district in which I ran, which is most of Oakland, San Leandro, and Alameda, was over 60% tenants. Of course, we only have 2 tenants out of 120 lawmakers, which is a reason why some of these things don't pass, and that's a whole nother story. But and 40% of our state lawmakers are landlords, not just property owners. And there's a lot of reasoning behind why we don't have the statewide tenant protections that we need. In Oakland, thankfully, we have some of the strongest rent control measures in the state of California, but it's not good enough because of many of the state laws that prevent the city from doing everything that it wants to do to support tenants. But I say that and also mention that, unfortunately, days after the Newsom recall, days after, 2 weeks after he was, voted to stay in office, which is wonderful, he did nothing to extend the statewide eviction moratorium. So people are being evicted right now because of failures to pay rent. And of course, there has been federal money given towards rent relief, but the barriers to accessing these pools of money cannot be understated. The language access, technology access, knowledge access, delays in funds actually being distributed. So there are many issues to that. But one thing I do want to mention is that Alameda County's eviction moratorium is still in effect. So if you live in Oakland or other parts of Alameda County, regardless of the kinds of threats and coercions and false statements landlords might make, you are still protected under the moratorium for now. And, keep your eyes out if you have friends, neighbors, family being threatened by your landlord to be evicted on the basis of not paying rent. And contact your local legal aid office for sure.
I'd like to interject. Carol is running about 15 minutes late. Do you mind staying a little bit extra? Because I could talk to you all day, as you know, and Dr. Ashton and I, we're glad to see you back. Do you mind? Can you stay on an extra about 10 or 15 minutes?
I can say, yeah, sure.
Yes. Okay. Go ahead, Dr.
I have
Ashley.
to make up for the lost time here.
Well, just remember, you are a welcome breath of fresh air. Tall glass of water on a hot day on this show. Dr. Ashley?
Yes, Janani, we're so glad you're staying with us. I'm just curious, can you talk, can we kind of unpack what you just said? Because I think it's really important. If someone is facing threats or coercion or just the idea that they may be evicted, you said contact the local their local legal aid office. Can you kind of walk us through a little bit more about that for those who may not know the steps to take?
Sure. So every county across California has one or more legal aid offices, and you do not have to, they're free legal services. So if you type, if you Google your county and free legal aid services, something should come up. My organization, Centro Legal, is one of many legal aid organizations in Alameda County. And, and one of the few organizations that's currently still distributing some of the rental relief funds for this county. Each county has its own process, but funds still are available if you are a tenant and also if you're a property owner. There are a lot of small landlords out there that did not know during the pandemic, well, we're still in the pandemic, but in the past few months, that you qualify for rent, for back rent that your tenants have not been able to pay. Now, there are some landlords that have chosen not to accept this funds in order to be able to evict their tenants, but for the most part, property owners small landlords would like to keep their tenants and would like to receive the money that they've been owed, and if the state can pay it, why not? So the funds still are available. I see links in the chat over there about where to identify them. There are lots of resources and funds still out there if you're in need of support right now.
I like doing.
That's his way. That's his way.
I like doing it. I feel like I'm in class. Janani, I got a couple of questions. First is, they have something called a California Rental Relief Program or the California Relief Rental Program. Can you explain that? And then the second part, because my understanding, they had $46 million or $1 billion to assist people, and the money was sitting there as of, I think, a month ago. They still had $32 billion. So if you have that kind of money sitting there to help you, reach out for it. Second, I was watching the news the other day, and what concerned me most is a couple and another gentleman was being harassed by the landlord who turned off their water, was entering their home while they were gone, and a host of other illegal, unethical things. Can you talk about those two issues, please? Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, as far as resources, there's never full transparency in the status of how much funds have been released. I remember while I was running for state assembly, I frequently talked about distribution rates being as low as 5 or 10%. Wow. I know that number has increased, and we, as the state of California, received $2.2 billion from Biden, from the federal government, for rental relief earmarked specifically. But right now, the website that is kind of the central California website about funds is called Housing is Key. It's a state website. That is the central administrator for the funds if folks are in need right now.
And then the second question was how do you deal with a landlord who is doing illegal things, turning off your PG&E, your water, entering your home illegally? My understanding watching this on the news was that there was mold found in the apartment, and the tenants asked the landlord to address it, and instead of him addressing it, he was trying to address them out of his unit. So what is a renter to do under those circumstances? Thank you.
So firstly, there are so many illegal aspects of that I can break down, but a landlord has to give notice before they enter the property, depending on where, but generally 24 hours notice before you enter a property. You can't, even though it's yours, even though you own it, you can't show up unexpected. Second are, all mold and things like that are called, in legal terms, habitability issues. Big problem in Oakland, especially during the pandemic. There have been some serial landlords and some corporate landlords that refuse to address people's concerns about mold, leaking, the heaters not working, stoves not working, electricity turning off, dangerous conditions where you had children, elders, all sorts of people in, and just this assumption that, these tenants don't know their rights because they don't speak English, or they're low income, or they don't understand the legal system. They're not going to have access to lawyers. And that assumption is so flawed, because you, as a property owner, if you're charging rent, have an obligation to keep premises habitable, which means things have to be working. Basic services, heat, water, things like that. And that's a requirement. And again, what you should do is contact the legal aid office. Now, one thing that I think is kind of intimidating to a lot of tenants oftentimes is the idea of having to go to court. No one wants to go to court. No one wants to be evicted. No one wants to live in fear of being evicted. And that's why a lot of times tenants, even that know that they could access free legal counsel, don't, because they don't want an eviction on their record. They just want to stay where they are and be left alone, and they'll just deal with it. But the reality is that there are so many rights that folks can exercise, especially when it comes to safe living conditions. And landlord coercion is a big deal. And, the law alone can't solve it. There are never enough free lawyers for the number of people that need it. That's true. But a lot of times these cases don't go to court. You have an angry letter from a lawyer saying, hey, my client knows their rights, or a phone call, or just a list of things a tenant themselves can tell their landlord, breaking down sections of the law that they have the right to. Landlords get scared. Oh, I didn't know you knew sections of the California Civil Code. Okay, I better back off so you don't sue me, or charge me penalties, or all sorts of things. And this is the case with tenants' rights. And as I'm involved in now more so, it's the same thing with regard to workers' rights. Legal aid organizations that are all about activism and social movements, want to focus on helping individual clients empower themselves, empower their neighbors, spread the knowledge so that people can, assert their rights with folks who want to continue to sadly deny them.
Dr. Ashley, because if you don't, I have a gang of questions right here.
Go ahead. I'll give you the go ahead.
You had it on mute. I almost said. Let me ask you something, Janani. In light of this homelessness problem here in Oakland, this gentrification process here in Oakland, and yes, Mayor, it is a gentrification process that has been moving forward since Jerry Brown was mayor. Gentrification, that means dislocating people of modest means, or Black and brown people. But anyway, in light of that, I understand there's been and you alluded to that earlier, that has been a moratorium, it's been a hold on evictions. Can you explain that a little bit, such that our audience who are running in California, I know what's going on, but I think the county of Alameda, but can you talk a little bit about that, and who and where, if a person who's facing eviction can go in light of this winter season coming up? And where it rained last week, Sunday, I would hate to see anyone out there without a roof over their head and a working stove and heater. Thank you.
You know, I think the last time I was on the show, I mentioned I started to get to know folks at one of Oakland's large encampments, actually, and some of the residents shared photos of the torrential rain this weekend, and the way that I just saw from these photos it devastating their community, flooding, sanitation out the door. I mean, it was really, is this Oakland? Is this the Bay Area? Is this California, the wealthiest state in the nation? This looks like a war zone. This looks like it was, the United Nations has actually declared homelessness to be a human rights crisis, I believe, sometime in the past couple of years because of the scale of what is going on. And it was extremely upsetting to see photos of people living just in absolute chaos. I mean, rains tore people's homes apart in Oakland, you know, in our city borders. And some of these communities, what they have is a strong sense of community and love towards each other. And the way that I know residents of some of these encampments truly did show up for each other and constantly show up for each other, show up for residents that have more serious mental health issues and can't function in the same ways, show up for residents that have mobility issues and can't go, and if their entire stock of food is now rained on, can't sit and go to the store to buy it. I really did see, and I am seeing as I get to know this community better, people showing up for each other in really tangible ways. This is a community that has, you know, installed a water tank so that the residents can have showers, things like that. Multiple times there have been folks from the outside who have contaminated them. There are resources that this community has pulled together to build. They built a dome structure to be a, you know, open mic night space and lounge area and performance venue. And an arsonist, not part of the encampment, burned it down. And there is just crisis after crisis, and I don't know how folks continue on. And then it's just taught me a lot about the sense of love that is so strong in this community and is the same way in so many communities in Oakland as well. You know, we can go back talking about those apartments throughout Oakland that have been shunned by landlords who have completely neglected their responsibility to keep habitable, basic habitable, not have rodents lying around, not have holes in walls, not have stoves that don't work. And residents are paying for these apartments. And what keeps people going is a sense of mutual aid and community, which we are seeing thriving more and more throughout this pandemic and moving forward. And that's here to stay. We have everything from community fridges cropping up around Oakland and all parts of Oakland. We have faith-based groups. We have folks who never really thought of the concept of, you know, helping your neighbor as being an important form of going back to activism, but that is a form of activism. It's a form of justice. It's not just charity. It's helping each other, because you might be that person that needs help tomorrow. You might be that person that gets kicked out of your home, talking about tenants and homelessness and the housing crisis. Any of us can. I certainly, know so many people in my own life that are just moments away from being on the streets themselves. And I want to do everything that's possible to support them, because if I'm in need, I want to be treated the same way in the future.
Janani, the information that you're sharing with this audience is invaluable. Once again, last weekend, it rained so hard. It rained so hard. All I did was look out the window and said, I pray to God there's nobody got they're stuck out there. So in your travel and doing your career and your job and your work, how Dr. Ashley, this is to you. How can that be? What's the psychological effect of a mother, single mom with kids, living in an encampment, and just down the street, as you see, I'm bringing a segue in for our next. Living down the street from a house that's been vacant for a year, and the kid walks by and sees the vacant house. What is the psychological effect on these kids and parents that you can share with our audience?
Janani, I'm glad you shared that story, but I found myself it's such a sore spot in seeing that, and we're having that same housing crisis in Los Angeles. You know, what's really interesting to me is self-preservation is pathologized based on who's engaging in it. And it's really interesting when we talk about, here I go, put on my therapist hat, but Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And one of our basic level needs that we have are biological needs, but we also talk about safety and housing. And the amount of violence that is perpetuated against unhoused residents is
Right.
disgusting. And I just have to label this. I am disgusted to hear that an arsonist destroyed a place of creativity and resilience and dignity for our unhoused residents in Oakland. And for what? But we again have this dehumanizing view that we're still fighting against. And I really appreciate, Janine, when you said, you know, we all could take a look in the mirror and think about how close or one paycheck away from one crisis, one health crisis away from, God forbid, you know, a threat of loss of housing. And so again, when we think about a single mother, back to your question, Doug, who or the children are walking by and seeing housing, children are very bright, but children, one of the things that they do is they often take ownership, accountability, and responsibility for things that they have no control over, did not cause, but they're very good at recognizing difference. Why do they have a house and we don't have a house? Why can't we have housing? Why this house is available? Why can't we live here? And I think it starts for children. They draw conclusions really quickly that can be harmful to their self-esteem, where they think because they have limited resources or access that may mean that they're not valued, they're not loved. And we can understand the risk factors if our youth feel that way about ourselves. So like older millennial, we like to say it's in you, not on you. And the reason why we like to say that is because your worth is in you, your inherent worth, your value, and that conditions externally can change, but it takes a certain age for a child to understand that. And then let's just be honest too about bullying. Bullying in schools is largely related to appearance and what you don't have. And so it's just, everyone deserves to feel safe in any type of weather, especially in the winter. Individuals who are unhoused often are survivors of multiple types of trauma, including sexual assault that happens, that's underreported, medical conditions that are untreated. And I just don't understand how people can truly sleep at night. And I see the rest of us, we didn't during the terrains when we saw the rain and what was happening, to see like knowing we can do something and aren't doing it. Yeah, Doug.
I love doing that. You know, about 5 years ago, my daughter was in LA, and she had an issue with her and her roommate, and she called and said, "Dad, I'm driving with my stuff in my car because me and my roommate had whatever issue." Ladies, let me be perfectly clear. When it was around 4 o'clock that day when she called me, by 6, and she was down in LA. By 6:30, I was locked, loaded in my truck, going down Highway 5, heading to LA. On the way down there, I called and said, "I just called the Hilton. You pull in there." And I told the hotel person that my child was coming there, make sure she has a key to get in the room. So that was something I had an option in. A lot of parents don't have that option. A lot of people don't have that option. So I may not know how it feels to be homeless or have a child homeless, but let me tell you something. When I was driving to LA, I had been up since I think it was like 5 o'clock that morning. I had just finished up a project, but I was driving to LA with a big cup of Starbucks. It's called a red eye, but I got the 5-shot red eye. That's 5 add shots in a cup of coffee because my whole concern was my daughter driving around and she don't have a place to stay. So when we got down there, it was around 1-2 o'clock in the morning. I stayed down in LA for 7 days, making sure that either you had a place to stay when I leave, or you were coming back with me, and I'll put your car, which is a Honda, in the back of my truck or tow it back. But you talking about anxiety, overwhelmed. So, audience out there, you find yourself having issues, contact Janani. Can you tell them how to contact, who to contact? Because that could give you a heart attack. That could be, I could have been like Fred Stanford. Oh, Elizabeth, I'm coming here. You guys may be too young to know about Fred Stanford.
Sanford and Son.
Yes, but
yeah. Go ahead, Janani.
But like I was talking about before, there are communities of people that are ready to help you. In many instances, yes, there are lawyers and there's legal aid organizations. In other cases, there are faith leaders, there are neighbors, there are tenant unions, there are labor unions. There are so many different kinds of people that are ready to support you in your time of need. And I'm grateful to have shared this dialogue with you here today. And, we need to work towards making housing a human right, period, and making sure it happens. And I know our next speaker lives that by her example. So I will stop talking.
Well, Janani, I just got a message that Carol Fipes is here, and I believe you know Carol Fipes.
Yeah.
You sisters, and I do say sisters, you are changing the world. We men have kind of dropped the ball, fumbled the ball, kicked the ball, ran the other way, and whatever, but I am so proud to be surrounded with so much intelligence. Dr. Ashley, Janani Ramachandji Esquire, the doctors and lawyers, and now Carol Fipes ready to come on. But Janani, once again, it is a pleasure to have you back on the show. And we look forward to you next week.
I'll be there.
All right. Dr. Ashley, can you take us into a commercial break and let's get our next dynamite lady on the... And I want you all to know I wore this for 2 reasons. This is my security outfit since I got all these important ladies on the show today. I'm prepared to take care of you. Go ahead, Dr. Ashley. I'll see you next week, Janani.
Thank you, Janani. Thank you, Mr. Donnie Glover of BlackUSA.news. And be sure to tune in to Sister Biz with Nicole and Tamara on Wednesdays, and also Black USA Crypto News with Kamal Hubbard on Fridays. Learn more about Tammy Willis, owner of Magnolia Engineering and Construction, by visiting the website www.magnoliaengineeringandconstruction.com. Magnolia Engineering and Construction would like to be a part of growing with the community of Oakland, California. Please connect with Magnolia Engineering and Construction now on all social media platforms. And once again, an invitation to our listeners to join our advertising family. Contact us at bbrt2021@hotmail.com. Back to you, Doug. Oh, Doug, you know my role.
Girl, I'd be lost if you weren't here guiding me into the light. Thank you, my own doctor. Well, let's welcome our next guest, Carol Fipes, council member elect. Dr. Ashley, can you please read her bio? Thank you.
Absolutely. Ms. Carol Fife is the council member-elect for Oakland's District 3. After decades of public service as a nonprofit director and community organizer, Carol was called to run for office by the people with whom she organizes every day. One of the founding members of Moms for Housing, Carol has fought both in the halls of power and in the streets to protect the human right to housing. As council member, her priorities will be to divest from police, to invest in community, get every unsheltered person in Oakland into housing as quickly as possible, and create progressive tax structures to correct social and racial inequities. Her historic winning campaign, supported by virtually every endorsing organization in Oakland, was powered by over 1,000 active volunteers and has transitioned into a permanent political organization dedicated to passing transformative legislation and building a progressive majority on the Oakland City Council. We want to welcome Ms. Carol Fife. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Mhm.
My sister, my friend, my decade plus colleague, girl, well, I remember the fights we used to go against on the NAACP, testing and challenging the establishment, letting them know that we are not going to sit and go quietly into the night. I am so proud and happy to have you on the show. Second, if you see I have my Men in Black outfit on, your security is here. So tell my brother Terha, step down. I got you for about 45 minutes. But anyway, Dr. Ashley,
I will let him know.
This sister's amazing. So please fire off the.
Absolutely. Again, thank you again for being here. We want to start off by asking, can you share with us your history and how you got started in community activism and how that became such a passion for you?
Well, first of all, I do want to say that I apologize. I'm in transit. There's a million things happening today. So I'm in a vehicle and moving around. There's lots of lights and shadows. I just want to apologize for that. And if the sound is a little off. But in terms of organizing, I've always been, concerned about people's well-being, especially people who didn't have access to power or ways to change their lives. And as a kid, it was like animals, right? And then I remember when I was young watching, I think it was an ABC after school special, and seeing that how, some children grow up without families. And I knew I wanted to adopt 20 kids, like in this show that I saw on the after school show on TV, and just really wanting to do something with my life, something of purpose, and making an impact to make somebody's life better. So as an adult, that just, as I learned and was educated, that turned into, how do I help my community? How do I use this, fraction of time that we have on the earth to impact other people's lives in a way that's bigger than myself? And, because I came here in this form of a Black person in America, and looking at the conditions of so many Black folks, I'm just like, growing up asking myself, is there something wrong with Black people? Because we face the same issues in every single city, in every single state, in every country around the world. Black folks seem to be on the bottom. So there's something either like intrinsically wrong with Black people, or there's something wrong in the systems that we live in. And I just, I've always wanted to change that. So it kind of grew up in me. I grew up seeing people around me give back to community, and I just wanted to do the same thing.
Wait a minute. Let me raise my hand. This is. I'm like I got all these intelligent sisters. I'm like I'm in class. CM fights. Let me just say this. I argue that case almost every show, especially at the beginning. I am tired of seeing Black people on the bottom of everything in this world: economics, housing, homelessness, health, everything. So that is why we clicked when we first met, because you and I both know you an intelligent sister. I'm a pretty sharp brother. And we were committed to making a difference in our community. And I'm so proud of what you're doing out there, sister. So I'm gonna keep going because I can give you all the accolades in the world. You remember, I saw you fight. Now, let me tell y'all, this sister's about 5'1", 5'2", but I've seen her take on 6'5", 7-foot men and break them down, have them crying, break them down like a shotgun, girl. Anyway, let me go to the next question. I have known you for over 10 years and would like to give you the opportunity to share with the audience how you and I first met. Audience, get ready to hear this story.
Well, honestly, it was definitely through the NAACP. Were we both on the executive committee at that time, Doug? I don't remember, but I do remember you were actually arguing for a sister who was there that had been discriminated against in her job. And so my first introduction to you was you really throwing down in support of somebody else who had been being treated unjustly through discrimination at her job. And I think she lost her job as a result. And you were just consistently talking and organizing and going from place to place, trying to find support for her. So she could have, you had them dukes up, trying to make sure that she got the justice that she deserved. So that was my first introduction to how much you supported people other than yourself. And you were also, we also had that incident or event in City Hall where we were fighting for some things in the community. And we had a meeting in the mayor's office. And that was, there were so many, I don't even know how many struggles we've been in, Doug, but they've always been for other people and for justice, to bring like some semblance of security to people's lives. So it's, I don't even know which one came first, honestly. It's been a few.
Well, I just want to say this before I go to the next question. Council Member Carol Fipes, it's been an honor learning what I learned from you. I remember when you went to the United States, they had the delegates, meeting back. I don't know where it was, but I think you know more than me.
I did 2016 and 2020 was a delegate.
Your commitment to helping others inspired me to keep going. And by the way, the woman won a lawsuit and everything worked out. Hey, Carol, when you take on a Fipes or a Blacksher, you taking on the best, baby.
Wow. I didn't know that. That's
won.
good. That's good.
The two lawyers, the ones who were married, they came on and helped the white people do the case, and it was a victory. So
good.
Yeah, turned out well. When you
Good
take
deal.
a Fipes or a Blacksher on, you better get ready because we ready to rumble.
That's right.
The next question is, recently you were preparing and supporting the site for unveiling the Dr. Huey P. Newton sculpture this past October 24th, honoring his and the Black Panther Party legacy. I believe this was located at Mandela and Dr. Huey P. Newton, formerly 9th Street. Can you tell us about this effect to honor his legacy, or this effort to honor his legacy? Thank you.
I think that it is really important that we see images of ourself, of self-determination in our own communities. And we've seen several symbols throughout the country being taken down because they don't represent what people believe is emblematic of a country that we should be fighting for, that we should invest in. And I think with the legacy of Dr. Huey P. Newton, especially right here in the city of Oakland, where no other permanent installations of the Black Panther Party exist in a way that is so prevalent for the public to exist, to be able to touch and reach out and be moved by. I think it was a historic event. And I think it's necessary for future generations to know the history that started right here in Oakland, California. And I also do want to give a shout out, because there was some debate about what exists and what doesn't exist. And there are artists like Rifa Sinai from Aerosol Art, who has depictions of the Panther Party all over the city of Oakland, that I want to shout out to, because he's a Panther Cub. His parents were active in the party as rank and file members, and very active in fundraising for the party. So I do want to shout that out too. But I think it's important to acknowledge that we need examples of leadership in our communities. And that's what Dr. Huey P. was. He was a genius. He created a legacy that people are still talking about and organizing under 55 years later. So I think it's relevant for the times we're living in now, where we're fighting for the same things that they outlined in the 10-point program. And we still need survival programs. They're still being duplicated to this day. And so I just think it was important for the times that we live in to recognize the contributions of Dr. Huey P. Newton and the Black Panther Party on their 55th anniversary.
Doug, my favorite words you want to hear me say.
Carol, as you can see, you sister, you was protecting me back then. Now you can see I got Dr. Ashley, and she's also giving me some therapy when I needed to. But this question is per your Instagram posting on October 6, 2021. You share a flyer that states, "We are all better together. Get COVID tested today." In California, Black residents are the fourth most affected group of COVID-19, making up 4% of all California cases. How has the pandemic affected your District 3 community?
Well, I'll say this: it's definitely caused. It's just been an upheaval. Black folks, as you said, Doug, are already experiencing the worst indicators in every area of people activity, from healthcare to education, unemployment, everything, life expectancy. So, COVID came and kind of just turned that on its head with a people who are already suffering some of the worst conditions in our communities. And so it's important to acknowledge that we never had the safety net to make sure that everybody was okay. And even now, with the skepticism that is truly and accurately based in Black folks' willingness to trust the medical system, there's still some concerns about, is this good for us as a people? So, I never discount the distrust that Black folks have for the medical industry, because it's based in history. There's facts there. It's, how you sometimes are at a park or like in public, and there are people, specifically certain people who walk around with no chains on their dogs. Mm-hmm. And they're like, "Oh, don't trip. They're not going to hurt you. They're safe. Nothing's going to bother you." And you're like, no, we have a legacy in history with dogs being used on us in a certain kind of way. So we have a fear, justified or not, but there's some history there to why we don't just think everybody's dog is a nice dog. So just be respectful and understand the history and say, okay, well, let's figure out how to get through this, this feeling that you have, so that, everybody feels safe. So I just use that as an analogy to say, no, there's some history around why we react to certain things in a certain kind of way. And there's still not the support in the medical system and in our governmental systems to provide the actual resources that people need to be healthy and safe in the Black community. So I don't know if that answers your questions, but there's still a lot of work to do on that front.
Well, before you go ahead, Dr. Ashley, let me just say this.
Mhm.
Me and a friend, we were we were not going to take that shot until I have a family member who's a doctor who gave me some of the best advice. But I said, look, I'm not getting syphilis or gonorrhea or anything shot into my system. And when I went down, when I was finally convinced to take the shot, I went down to, it was a, actually it was in your area off of 34th and San Pablo. There were more white people in the line than Black people. It was 150 plus white because the line was around the corner, and it was a handful of Black people. So that was kind of telltale to me. I said, well, at least if I catch something, there's going to be a whole bunch of white people scratching and having burning feelings too. So go ahead, Dr. Ashley.
No, you're crazy. But honestly, Councilmember Fife, I just want to say before I ask this question, I really appreciate your comments, because healthy mistrust, especially medical mistrust or the historical trauma of dogs, or the reason why generations of African Americans can't swim. When we talk about these things without the context of the assaults on pools and pouring things into the pools, or dogs being used as a source of violence, the worst thing we can do is to gaslight. So I really appreciate that context that you provide, and then we can talk about the healing. But there's no accountability. We can't stop at being gaslit. But I get the privilege of asking the next question. I've looked on your website, saw the successes and highlights of the work you've been doing. Thank you so much. I want to ask you if you can inform our listeners about the Pallet Shelter Villages project, and the momentum and what's been going on with that.
Well, things are not moving nearly as fast as I would like them to move, but they're moving nonetheless. And one of the things that I wanted to do in my tenure as council member was address the crisis of homelessness in the city of Oakland. And while I realize that this issue is much larger than any one city and any one council member, I wanted to see what I could do to just take a chunk out of District 3's homeless situation. We have one of the largest populations in the entire city of Oakland, which is true for the county of Alameda, because Oakland is such a large city in the county. One of the solutions that I have is an emergency solution. I want to be clear, it's not a permanent solution. I think the answer to being unsheltered is to have safe, affordable, and healthy housing. And, because the system is so problematic, it's not going to happen in 10 months. I've been in office now for 10 months. But one of the emergency crisis solutions was to set up pallet shelters. And they're different than the tough sheds, the tool sheds, because they actually have an ability to heat the units. They're insulated. They can be painted, and we're going to have a huge artist, the Black Artist Guild, come out and help us with murals and paintings and planting, edible plants and things like that, in conjunction with the community, to help at the site that I'm standing up at 3rd and Peralta. And that will be in conjunction with the residents who live there. So we'll be able to have at least 40 to 60 units of emergency housing that is humane for people to live in, on my path to get some of these buildings that are vacant, which I'm still committed to in this role to make housing a human right, is getting permanent shelter. This is just a step along the way.
Mm-hmm. But an important step. Thank you for your efforts, and a very important step.
Now, at the Army base that I'm working on too, which I'm really having to push the city administration on, that should be able to house between 1,000 to 2,000 people, and that's the one that I think will have a really big impact on the city.
Dr. Ashley, can you take us, give us our sponsor and Donnie Glover his props so we can get back to this important, very, very important. And, you know, I just want to say this, you know, I just want to say that. Carol, Doug Blacksher, and Dr. Ashley. Now, sometimes there are a lot of things I don't agree with the NAACP, but I urge each and every one of you to join your local NAACP and learn where the fight is and how to take it to the man. Because at the end of the day, Carol, you went on to become council person. I went on to become a big mouth talking guy on TV, on the podcast. But that was a stepping stone for me to get here. Thank you. Dr. Ashley?
Okay. And now I'd like to thank Mr. Donnie Glover of BlackUSA.News, and be sure to tune in to the wonderful programming that is posted on Donnie Glover's YouTube page for informative and insightful Black community news. Also, we want to invite you to like us on Facebook today. And thank you to our main sponsor, Magnolia Engineering and Construction, whose mission is to become the premier building and engineering resource for large-scale commercial and transportation building projects in the Bay Area and beyond. Magnolia Engineering and Construction's vision is to further the presence of Black women in the construction and engineering industry through key partnerships and building contracts and in the municipal, government, and transportation sectors. And as we segue back to part 2 of our conversation with Councilmember Fife, I just want to acknowledge and ask our listeners a quiz, because I'm seeing clients right now, but still I'm a professor of psychology, to find out which demographic is the most educated in the United States. And you may find that it is African-American women. And back to you, Dust. I just feel the need to just flex a little bit.
And I want to piggyback off of that. Wells Fargo did a study back in 2016, 17, or 18, somewhere around there, where it pointed out that Black women-owned businesses were the best investment in America right now. So, Councilmember Fife, I don't know if you watch this show, but I make sure the women come on and light it up, because you ladies are bad. Once again, I got my Men in Black suit on, so you tell her how to stand down. I got your back, sister. Well, let's get back to our very, very important and special guest, Council Member-elect Carol Fife of District 3. Carol Fife, I got to get used to saying Council Member. Carol Fife, what is your plan of action for public safety in your District 3 of Oakland? Because let me be clear, an audience, I used to tell people, call the police. Call the police when you have a problem. Well, let me just be clear. OPD, you've let me down for the last year. You've let me down. And you continuously let me down. So, Carol, Council Member Carol Fife, please let us know your strategy, and there's an end result, or there's an end game for me asking you that. Thank you.
Well, I want to be really clear that once again, I had a lot of people support me when I was running for office. A lot of people, a lot of different organizations, because they believe in my my commitment, my passion, and my desire for real transformative change. But I want folks to understand that I'm still one person, and we are up against systems. We are up against a system of individuals who, and it's the same system that's always existed in this country, where folks brought Africans to America to work for free and had to fight a war to change that. Well, that changed it. It wasn't necessarily specifically for that, because as we know, Abraham Lincoln said, Black folks are still not worthy to be considered human beings. But at the same time, post-emancipation, the country was in a situation where they had created a superpower off slave labor, right? And so before emancipation, Black folks weren't seen as dangerous. Black folks were breastfeeding. Black women were breastfeeding and taking care of white people's children. They were in the homes and working with white folks all of the time. And so it was not an issue until emancipation. And then is when you saw the explosion of laws, vagrancy laws, all of these different things that engineered this perspective in the common discourse of Black folks being criminal, naturally criminal. Before it was, they're too dumb to be criminals, but now they should be feared and we have to lock them back up. And so now we have a situation where there are more Black people in prison that were ever enslaved, right? And serving the same purpose, which is free labor for this country. They make cell phone parts, they make refrigeration parts, they fight fires in the state of California, they pick cotton in Louisiana, and do all sorts of things to keep this economy moving. And so when we talk about police reform on a local level, we've got to know that that will disrupt the conditions of free labor that this country was built on. So when I'm talking about doing things differently, I'm not just talking about making sure that the police answer your phone calls when you call for a service. We're talking about disrupting a system that will change the entire economy of this country. So when folks see, trolls coming at me about my positions on policing on Twitter and Facebook and all these other social media spaces, or you see the Oakland Police Department putting out press releases and going on Fox News to attack me, it's not because I'm I'm saying things that are crazy. It's because if the things that I'm advocating come true, then they will lose their jobs. They will lose their jobs. And the reality is policing as it is designed in this country right now is not to end crime. It's to manage it. It's to manage it. And so they want it to continue because it keeps prisons in business. It keeps people's jobs and pensions in place, which invest in other things throughout the community. So it's not radical, what I'm suggesting, which is people deserve to be safe, but that safety starts at the beginning of life. That safety starts with having access to good paying jobs. That safety starts when people's neighborhoods are clean and kept up. It starts because they have a robust public education that allows them to thrive in the world. But that's not where we invest our money. We invest the bulk of our budgets into locking people up. So the more we lock people up, the more we will create these environments where families are broken, which they intentionally have done through first with heroin and then with crack and then with meth and now with all these other different ways that they can incarcerate folks. And so if we had, I'm saying, people say Carol hates the police and she wants to create this communist state. I don't even know all the things that people say about try to make my suggestion to invest in community evil. But if we had a fraction of the budget in the city of Oakland that the Oakland Police Department had to go to mental health, right? To give people therapy for growing up in traumatic environments or other things that don't allow them to thrive as human beings. The police get nearly $400 million a year. If we had $100 million a year, if we had a fraction of that, we could change the conditions in every neighborhood in the city of Oakland. But that won't happen because that will disrupt that money cycle that I just talked about that started with the free labor of bringing enslaved people to toil the fields in America. And people say that's idealistic and we can't talk about the past and that was a long time ago. But when things go undiagnosed and untreated, they show up as trauma and generational pain and generational things that impact our entire communities. And if they didn't want us to remember the past, and we wouldn't celebrate any of these holidays or any of these colonizers or other folks that we celebrate holidays for all the time. So we have to acknowledge the history.
You speaking my language, Carol. I'm in Los Angeles, but I'm Oakland born and bred and a psychologist. And I'm thinking, what can we do? How can we support? So we talked earlier, we always talk about generational trauma here, community violence, complex trauma. I started off my mental health career going back to Oakland Public Schools and training there before relocating. But we have some other questions for you, but I'm just curious, just right as you're pressing these buttons, to the mental health professionals that are in the city that are trying, what can we do to support your efforts regarding, holistic healthcare, healing circles, any type of interventions? What can we do?
Well, right now, what I'm trying to build out in my district is a model called 4Peace. And it's bringing in faith-based institutions from across the board. I have Jewish synagogues on board. I have Muslim, Islamic mosques. I have several churches that are participating, community organizations like the Oakland Symphony, other small businesses and elementary schools and high schools that all are participating in how do we create peace in our communities. And so that means that, folks come together, and we're planning to have quarterly meetings to just hear from community about what they need. And it's things like community safety. Have you all seen these dads in Louisiana who are now at the high schools? So creating those types of programs where we have community that's intervening when issues are small, so they don't pop off into larger situations. I have an ambassador program that we're launching with credible messengers who come from the lives that they've been able to turn around and are engaging in the situations to stop situations from growing. We have groups of people who do peace walks when incidents happen in the community, where we are talking to community members and make sure that they are in conversation with each other. We're cleaning up graffiti and trash in the neighborhood to make sure that when kids are walking to school, they see a beautiful neighborhood that they've even participated in. So we have several things. We also are looking to get some health providers, some mental health providers, and working with our clinics in the district to make sure that people have access to the resources that are currently available. We're doing food justice and giving away food and letting people know where the resources are, where they can come and get fed if they are hungry. So those are some of the things that we are doing to create peace. That's a part of our 4Peace campaign, and we're getting new signups every day. And that's one of the things that we're doing. And I want to say, I'm not saying that there's not a need for police. I mean, they've cultivated a situation in our communities where we need some folks to weigh in at some time. But the way that we do it is not right. They often exacerbate problems and escalate problems. But sometimes we do need a little bit of help. And until we have like some cycles of investing in our community, completely investing in our community, we're going to need backup. And I acknowledge that. But the way that we do that is really, really important.
Absolutely.
Dr. Ashley, you see, I'm about ready to jump out the chair. I got a question. Council Member Pipes, as we all know, the police, law enforcement, sheriff, they used to be, they were pretty much around back in the 17, 18, and 1900s. They were used to go after runaway slaves and bring them back to their masters. Now, I'm speaking from experience over the last year that I have a situation that I had to turn in numerous officers, internal affairs in Oakland, because they failed to serve me as they would a white man. They failed to serve me as they would a white man. I can tell you that I know your husband, and he knows me. When a couple of politicians were running, he was security for one, and I was security for the other. But let me be clear. I am concerned that the city of Oakland, OPD, is not as concerned in the Black neighborhoods as they are in the white neighborhood. Because through this gentrification process, and I'm going to keep it real, I'm going to keep my glasses off because I don't have to read this. I can do this with my own experience from the last year. That police see a Black man and a Black man and they call it mutual combat, or let them people work it out. I almost said the N word. But when they go into a white neighborhood, or a white man is in a Black neighborhood, if a Black man even looked at a white person wrong, they would send SWAT in there. So I say all that to say that is what advice can you give citizens who are being held hostage because the police department, and in my situation, OPD, refuses to do a job? When you've made numerous calls regarding someone pulling a gun on you, assaulting you, threatening you, and the Oakland Police Department does nothing. But if I were a white man and the gentrification process was going on in the neighborhood, they would have had SWAT there. So you being a politician in Oakland now, and I'm trying not to get too emotional about this, but I've had some serious issues. Matter of fact, when we get off this phone, I'm gonna call your husband and see if I can hire his services, because the Oakland Police Department is not looking at all Black people, and I'm one of them. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Thank you. And I apologize for this passion, but I've lost hundreds of hours, if not thousands of hours, and had deputy chief of police tell me that, oh, I know how you feel. No, you have no idea how I feel. Thank you. Pardon my passion, council member, but I am fed up with OPD.
Well, first of all, I'm sorry that you had to go through that. And that is something that so many people go through who look like us. There is a reality to services being offered to different neighborhoods differently. I mean, I've also experienced that. And so I think that's where it comes back to: the squeaky oil gets the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And I know I personally experienced people who start to organize when they don't get the answers that they want, and they start to get their neighbors together and start to make phone calls and really call out publicly what's happening. Those are the people who tend to get services. So it's not just like one voice, but it has to be a multiplicity of voices. And it it's challenging too, because they have their own press team that can, put out narratives and put out their perspectives about what's happening in the city. And it demonizes entire groups of people versus like addressing the real harm. And I think I know with your situation, I'm not sure why that wasn't dealt with immediately, because it seemed to be a very clear-cut set of circumstances. So once again, I apologize that you've had to go through this. And I think that's why we need community control of the police, like the Panthers were talking about 55 years ago. And then we also need to create our own systems in our communities where we're able to hold accountable the organizations that we pay our taxes to the tune of nearly $400 million a year, and hold them to account. Like, if we're not getting, if you go to a dinner and you pay $400 for a dinner and you don't get served right, you want your money back, or you want some kind of answer. So if we're talking about 400 million, we've got to come up with different solutions about how services should be delivered, especially in our most vulnerable areas, which tend to be the areas where Black people are concentrated. But once again, that's going to take the community speaking out about situations like yours and demanding something different.
Well, I'm going to read this quickly Malcolm X warned us more than 50 years ago, and I target this to what you said about Oakland using their PR person to downplay what's going on in the Black community. And I can tell you what's not going on in the Black community is policing. It's almost like they say, hey, you Black people work it out, fight it out, and kill each other. But we are not coming unless we have to. But let me finish this Malcolm X. The media is the most powerful entity on earth. They have the power to make the innocent guilty and to make the guilty innocent. And that's power. Because they control the minds of the masses. The press is so powerful in its image-making role, it can make the criminal look like he's the victim and make the victim look like he's the criminal. If you aren't careful, the newspaper will make you hate the people who are being oppressed and loving the people who are doing the oppressing. I say that to say this. I think Oakland needs, as you said, because the police will not, cannot, or incompetent to police in Black community. And that is why there's so much killing going on in Black community. I believe that there was and this is the last question, and we have some more stuff there, and we're working with less than 8 minutes. Carol, there is some misinformation currently circulating in regarding a contract secured by my brother Turha. I would personally like to give you the opportunity to clear up the rumors of this subject matter. And most importantly, I want to have Turha on the show, because let me tell you something, OPD, LAPD, New York PD, you are not policing in the Black neighborhoods. That's why the crime is so much concentrated in the Black. And you don't want to police in these Black neighborhoods. Not all of you, but a lot of you. If I just recently had to call the police on a situation that I've been dealing with for the last year. And you know when the police came? 5 days later. So go ahead. You know, I know we're working with less than 7 minutes. Because if you want to elaborate on that and you tell Turha, I would love for him to come on the show, because I've seen his crew out there. And let me be clear, they do better policing than any policing I've seen in my neighborhood. Thank you.
Well, because we don't have much time left. And I do want to say, I'm going to start saying that quote that you just gave from Malcolm like every day, because that's the God's honest. But what I will say about this situation, there's never been a contract that was awarded to Turha, which is why this whole situation is clearly a farce that is probably backed by policing organizations or sympathizers, because the situation as it unfolded was there were Black women who were teaching at the Peralta schools like 6-7 years ago, who've been trying to get Turha to come on campus for since like 2014 at least. And he's always been like, I don't want to get into that. I don't want to, because if that's directly that will directly cause a fight between the Alameda County sheriffs and the and whatever community groups are pushing for a change in how the security model is done. And we've seen that to be true, because every sister that was at the Peralta schools that was advocating for a demilitarized safety and security protocol at the Peralta schools has been targeted and either fired or harassed for even recommending a change. So I'll start there. And then so they had been asking him to come because of the work that he's done in Oakland for over 20 years, maybe 20, 30 years. And so, because people know how effective they are, Turha and his group, then, a lot of people ask for support. But he always said, if y'all do this at the Peralta schools, you got to do it in a certain kind of way. and fined for having a contract that he never took. He was fined by a state agency for doing work that he never has stepped foot on the campus to do. And then they tried to bring me into the situation and say that I got him a contract that he doesn't have. So if someone can produce this contract that he signed and show some timesheets that he's worked on campus or that he stepped foot or anybody associated with him has done, then please, we would love to see that information. But this is a hack job to discredit me, to undermine Black men, and to reestablish the only a narrative that the only people who can keep us safe are these overpaid sheriffs and policing agencies that don't care about our communities in the first place.
Council Member Fifes, the reason why I wanted to point that out is because, let me be clear, audience, and especially those audience who look like the people on this panel here. There's not too much policing going on in Black neighborhood. I can testify to that. I was the first one to be saying, hey, call the police. Don't go out there and act like it's a wild, wild west. But no, I don't say that anymore. I don't have any confidence in our police law enforcement. And to this day, I'm dealing with an issue that if I were a white, blue-eyed, blonde-haired man, I would not be dealing with this. And out of tens of thousands of dollars. Yes, tens of thousands, going to court, getting restraining order. When the city of Oakland did not, I had to get a criminal protective order. I mean, the judge issued it based on the situation, a criminal protective order. And I'm not used to having that because I have never been in this situation. But once again, I don't recommend calling the police anymore. I recommend calling Terha. Now, to that end, the reason why I brought up the media is because I implore you, audience, watch blackusa.news, watch the Black news so you can get the real news in the Black community. As we wrap this up, we're working with less than 2 minutes. As you may have saw the expressions on my face, Dr. Ashley, I might have to call you when the show's over to get some therapy because I am hot at OPD, and I wish one of them would call me and tell me that they would contradict anything because I've documented everything. Believe me. Carol, thank you for coming on the show today. I know you were running late. Oh, wait, yeah, let me get my stick because you can see I'm about ready to take the tie off. Carol, we need you to come back. Mm-hmm. First off, we need you to come back to clear up all this fallacy about trying to discredit you and your husband, because I know both of you. You're both impeccable. Mm-hmm. You just got on with the city council. You got 10 months. You're doing, to me, some amazing things, and you're still in a learning curve to do greater things. And with your vast experience working with the organizations that we both work with, you're going to do great. I got your back, sister, and you are always welcome on this show. Until Terha, I'm taking my tax dollars that I pay the police, and I'm going to pay him.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you for coming. And we're going to have you back because you have enlightened this audience like it has never been enlightened in regard to politics and the city of Oakland and any city in America where it's Black and brown people dealing with lack of services. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you. And it was good to meet you. I look forward to coming back.
Likewise, and love to hear about the 4-piece and how we can definitely promote and support that.
Sounds good. Thank you all. You all have a beautiful rest of your day.
You too. Thanks, Carol. Thank you to our weekly guest, Dr. Ashley Coleman, doctor of psychology. I'm going to have to call you after the show, doctor. My anxiety is off the chain right now. And Janani Ramachandran, Esquire, our grassroots fighter of human rights in Oakland. And congratulations on her new position. See more of Janani at Janani for California or on Instagram, Janani for California. Thank you to Carol Fifes. I'm ready to put the Dukes on now. Terha, call me. I want to come and take some self-defense courses and hire your team, because the police in Oakland are not policing unless you're white. And I can say that because I'm experiencing that fact. Got me all fired up here. Thank you to Carol Fife, council member elect of District 3. Visit carolfife.org or in Instagram at Carol4Council. Thank you all for your appearance on the show today, and hope that you will come back and continue to educate our growing audience in the future. A special shout out to Donnie Glover. Without you, Donnie, none of this would be possible. BlackUSA.news, Donnie Glover, we thank you. Our current sponsor, Magnolia Engineering and Construction. Tammy, I know you're going to change that BART auditing committee. You're going to turn it around and make them profitable. Find out where the leaks are. Join our BB Black Business Roundtable, BBRT for short, advertising family, or to be a possible guest on the show. Reach us via email, bbrt2021@hotmail.com. We also have a network of shows hosted by Mr. Donnie Glover, such as Chap and Friends on Monday, Party Marty, Let's Talk on Tuesday. Just saying that makes me want to party. Party Marty, Let's Talk on Tuesday. Sister Beer with Nicole and Tamara, my two sisters, on Wednesday. Black USA Crypto News with Kamal Hubbard, the brother who can tell you what's going on in the crypto world, on Friday. And be sure to check out these Black voices and guiding lights of our community. Thank you, audience. I apologize for going over, but it was such a fantastic show today. I wanted to make sure we squeeze every little bit of information out of Carol Fife. Thank you, audience, for tuning in. And remember, together we can listen, we can learn, and share, because I know you care. This is Doug Blacksher of the Black Business Roundtable. God bless and good night. Thank you.